Welcome to Your Space Journey, where we venture into the future of space exploration and the incredible leaders who are taking us there. Here's your host, Chuck Fields.
Hello, thanks for joining us today for Your Space Journey. I'm so excited to introduce our special guest today, Dr. Robert Zubrin. Dr. Zubrin is the president of Pioneer Astronautics, and he's also the president of the Mars Society. He's been a strong proponent of manned Mars exploration for the past several decades. But before we introduce you to Dr. Zubrin, I'd like to introduce our segment, Your Space Journey. This is where we have fans and listeners like you call in to tell us the story of their space journey. It's my privilege to introduce our special guest today, Jeff Ayers of Death Wish Coffee.
Hi, my name is Jeff Ayers, and I am the writer, producer, and host of the Fueled by Deathcast podcast from the Death Wish Coffee Company. My space journey began when I was born in 1981, the same year that the Space Shuttle program was born as well, and I've always been interested in everything to do with space and space exploration. I'm so excited to live in a world where that's part of the conversation again. Now people want to talk about space and space exploration, and kids want to become astronauts and scientists and work for amazing companies like NASA and SpaceX. And my journey has culminated with working for this company and creating a podcast where I not only have gotten to interview actual astronauts and people involved with space exploration, but helped send Death Wish Coffee to the International Space Station twice. Once to fuel the astronauts of Expedition 56, and another time as part of a science experiment. I'm so excited to see where space exploration will lead us as we head to the moon and to Mars and beyond.
Your Space Journey.
Thanks, Jeff, for that amazing story. If you'd like to submit the story of your space journey, just give us a call at 317-862-4700. You can leave us a voicemail, or you can email us an audio or video clip. Just send that email to info@yourspacejourney.com. Be sure to include your name, where your passion for space came from, and what you're most excited about for the future of space exploration. Now on to our special guest. I had the privilege of speaking with Dr. Zubrin a couple times recently, most recently about his new book that just came out called The Case for Space: How the Revolution in Spaceflight Opens Up a Future of Limitless Possibility. But a couple years ago, I spoke to Dr. Zubrin first on the phone that I'd like to share with you. I asked Dr. Zubrin where his passion for space came from, and here's what he had to say.
Well, I was 5 when Sputnik flew, and while the adults may have been terrified, I was exhilarated because it meant the science fiction stories that I was already reading were going to be true. And I went and I learned as much science as I could, and because I wanted to be part of it. And it very quickly became apparent to me that Mars was the closest planet that had a chance of having life, and which might have a chance for a human future there. And so I became interested in human exploration of Mars in the 60s.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Zubrin is not only president of Pioneer Astronautics, but he's also the president of the Mars Society. Here's Dr. Zubrin telling you a little bit more about what the Mars Society is.
The Mars Society is an international organization. We're in about 40 countries, devoted to furthering the exploration and ultimately settlement of Mars. We do 3 things. One is broad public outreach, just to spread the vision. Second is political work to try to convince the political class to support various Mars initiatives, including the robotic exploration programs, as well as things that would support human exploration. And finally, projects of our own, of which the most significant to date have been the establishment of human Mars exploration stations, one in the Canadian Arctic and one in the American desert, where people can practice Mars missions and try to find out what's likely to work on Mars and what isn't.
Now, Dr. Zubrin is also the author of many critically acclaimed books, including Mars Direct, How to Live on Mars, and Entering Space. He has appeared on major media, including CNN, BBC, the Discovery Channel, and NPR. Here's the main interview where I just spoke to Dr. Zubrin recently about his latest book, The Case for Space. Here's Dr. Zubrin explaining what this book is about.
Yeah, my book, The Case for Space, how the revolution in spaceflight opens up a future of limitless possibility.
Yes, love that title.
And so that's what it does. It discusses that. First, it talks about the revolution in spaceflight, the entrepreneurial space race that Elon Musk has set off and which is now going on great guns around the world, which already has resulted in a factor of 5 drop in the cost of space launch, and with more to come. And then what this will make possible in Earth orbit, on the moon, on Mars, asteroids, the outer solar system, and onward to the stars. And then, so that's about the first 2/3 of the book discussing those possibilities. And then the final third discusses why this needs to be done and why we must not let this revolution be stopped. Okay, and it goes through a number of reasons, only one of which, or two, are even discussed by most people. Okay, the ones that are discussed, but which I add a lot to the discussion of, is for the knowledge, the tremendous knowledge that human expansion into space will bring. And this is the one area in which NASA has actually been quite successful, but which we can do more. Second is for our survival, to get control of our solar system environment. I mean, we're not going into space to desert the Earth so that if the Earth is hit by an asteroid, some people will survive. We're going into space to become spacefarers so we can protect the Earth from being hit by asteroids by being able to deflect them out in deep space. Okay, and then there are other reasons for the challenge. And what it will do for our society to embrace challenge instead of declining it. And then for our freedom and for our future, okay, and the future of others, and discuss what it implies for the 21st century if we have an open future, if we have a closed future. If we have a closed future, there will be that idea will drive the Earth towards war, just as it did in the 20th century.
Right.
If you think this is all there is, then sooner or later you're going to have it out with the rest of them. And for one side or the other, it's better to do it sooner rather than later. So that mindset needs to be broken. And then finally, the grand future that we can create. The most important things you do in your life aren't even for yourselves. They're for posterity. That's what really matters. You can't take it with you, So
true.
What is going to be your effect on the future, which goes on forever?
Dr. Zubrin, I love your passion, and I know your book, The Case for Space, definitely portrays that, but I also love just the practicality of it. You mentioned the reusability, and in the book you start talking about, just in common sense terms, cost and dollars, as far as how we can make spaceflight more affordable, not only for companies, but also for individuals. I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit more on that.
All right. Well, the first steps, have been taken and are being pushed further by SpaceX, and they're being followed hot on their trail by Blue Origin and to some extent Virgin Galactic. And I happen to know that there are 5 funded Chinese startups that are getting into this game.
Really?
And there are undoubtedly others around the world. And now, okay, Musk, both through reusability and also by attacking the cost plus contracting model, has caused a factor of 5 drop in the space launch. Literally, I mean, the Falcon 9 can lift a payload equal, to the Delta 4 Heavy at 1/5 the cost, and so there you go. Now this is going to result in more satellite launches, which will, with an expanded market, that will drive the cost even more down. Mm-hmm. But also it makes possible new kinds of activities. And the most important one is going to be point-to-point travel on Earth. What space is an ocean of zero drag surrounding the Earth. People have made money for 3,000 years on the ocean. Okay, some have made it by fishing, that is actually extracting value from the ocean, mm-hmm. but far more money has been made by using the ocean as a low-drag medium for travel from point to point, from port to port on Earth. Now, the space is a global ocean of zero drag. And with reusable spacecraft, we can talk about rocket planes, if you wish, that travel from anywhere to anywhere on Earth in less than an hour. And, okay, 100 satellite launches or so happened last year. SpaceX got a quarter of them. Potentially, they could get half. They can't get all of them because half of them are Russian launches and Chinese launches. Right. They're not up for competition. Well, 50 launches, that's not enough to reduce the cost of space launch by a factor of 100, which is what we're really interested in. Mm-hmm. And the cheaper launches will probably double or triple, may have 200 or 300 launches, satellite launches within a couple of years as a result of this. But there are thousands of long-distance airplane flights every day. Okay, so now that's the market that will bring about travel to space for the cost of a first-class airplane ticket. And what we'll start seeing after that is, okay, so you're going New York to Sydney in 45 minutes, but that same craft that can do that can basically stay in orbit. So maybe you take a day trip, you're a day tour around the world. You stay in space for a few orbits, but you don't want to stay on a rocket plane for a week in space because the rocket plane owners don't want to keep it in space for a week because they could be making money by daily flights. Mm-hmm. So now you're talking about space hotels. Drop you off there. Now Bigelow's business plan starts to make sense. And now orbital labs, orbital industries all become possible. Okay, so that's the first step. Then, okay, there's the moon, and now it'll become much cheaper to reach the moon, and we can talk about lunar development, both scientific and industrial, arrays of telescopes doing interferometry from the moon, lunar helium-3. There isn't fusion power now, but one of the results of the entrepreneurial space revolution is it set off an entrepreneurial revolution in fusion power development. A bunch of people looked at Musk's success, and then they looked at fusion and said, maybe fusion power is like cheap space launch. Maybe the problem was never really technical. Maybe it was institutional. Maybe a privately funded fusion power development company could do the job where the government bureaucracies couldn't. And now we have a whole bunch of fusion startups, and I've discussed about 5 of them in the book,
yes,
that have gotten $500 million worth of investment, and they're roaring ahead. Now, so that's the moon. Then there's Mars, which has got much more materials on it that could be used for resources. So in terms of developing a full-fledged civilization and not just scientific or industrial outposts, Mars is the best goal, and we'll get it. And then asteroid development, outer solar system, there's vast supplies of helium-3 in the atmospheres of Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune that could be accessible. Why should, our planners in Washington be planning for an energy war with China over the oil in the Persian Gulf when there's energy in space that is literally billions of times more plentiful, that is available to all of us if we just work together?
I totally agree with you on that. And one thing that you mentioned too, you talk about propulsion, getting us there a little bit quicker. You mentioned some other technologies that we could probably easily implement to make sort of when we become, I guess, star voyagers and we want to get to another star, we want to do it in way less than a human lifetime. Can you tell us just a little bit more about the other propulsion technologies that are on the horizon?
Well, okay, to be clear, we don't need advanced propulsion to go to the moon. We don't need advanced propulsion to go to Mars.
Good point.
And we could probably use it, but don't actually need it to get to the asteroids. Now, once you start talking about outer solar system development, we really want advanced propulsion. And certainly to go to the stars, we must have it.
Right.
And now, the most potent form of propulsion that is within the engineer's conceptual toolbox right now would be fusion power. A fusion-powered rocket using helium-3 and deuterium could probably get to about 10% the speed of light.
Incredible.
Now, there could be other things, breakthrough physics things that people talk about, but I'm not a theoretical physicist. I'm an engineer. I look at how I can apply the physics that's known. And within known physics, that's what we can do. Now, So that gets you to Alpha Centauri in 40 years. But maybe we could do better than that. I mean, if we're talking about beamed power that could push light sails, then we could go faster. Although the energy source to drive those things probably would have to be fusion, especially for power stations that are not near the sun but further out to help push it along. There's other things, but I think it is the settlement of Mars in particular. While it's possible with existing propulsion, absolutely, you can get to Mars in 6 months with existing propulsion, it will drive the development of advanced propulsion in the same way that European settlement of North America drove nautical technology. Columbus crossed the Atlantic in ships that even 50 years later, no one would have attempted to do it in.
Right.
Because there weren't Atlantic-class ships in Columbus's time because there was no Atlantic trade. But once Western civilization became transatlantic, they developed better ships. They developed three-masted caravels, and then clipper ships, and then steamboats and ocean liners, and ultimately Boeing 747s. And of course, the airplanes were actually invented by the branch of Western civilization that they had established on the other side of the ocean. Okay, so similarly, the first colonists will go to Mars probably in chemically propelled spacecraft that takes 6 months to get there. That's about as long as it took to travel from England to Australia in the 1800s. But their grandchildren will do the trip in 2 weeks with fusion-powered spacecraft, and they'll listen to the tales of their grandparents with the same kind of wonder that some of us listen to, our immigrant grandparents telling of coming across in the bilges of tramp steamers and eating the orange peels thrown into the bilge by the first-class customers when we cross the ocean in comfort on giant airplanes in hours. So this is what will drive it. And then the same technologies that make it a matter of luxury travel and ease to travel to Mars will make it possible for more adventurous people to travel to Saturn and ultimately the stars.
See, I think that's incredible. And you mentioned earlier, and I love how your book is laid out. The first 2/3 of it is how we can explore space. The last third is why we should. And one thing I really love how you pointed out that unless we explore, a lot of cultures, once they stopped exploring, they sort of stagnate. I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I think that civilizations are like individuals. We grow when we challenge ourselves. We stagnate when we do not. And this is felt most particularly among the spirit of youth, when people are deciding what they're going to do. Is their goal in life going to be one of seeking safety and comfort, or is it going to be one of seeking adventure and great deeds? And when they lose that second impulse, the culture starts to stagnate and decline. Now, we've seen a positive example demonstrating this in our own country during the Apollo period. When we were going to the moon, and we were going to go to Mars after that, and the outer solar, and all this, okay, the number of science graduates in this country doubled in the 1960s at every level, high school, college, and in fact, it tripled at the PhD level. And as soon as the Apollo program was killed in the early 70s, we absolutely flatlined. The rise just stopped, okay? Because what? Youth loves adventure. And the Apollo program and its clear sequel, we're saying to every young person, learn your science and you could be explorer of new worlds. And so out of that, we got millions of scientists and engineers and inventors and technological entrepreneurs. And who were, the 40-year-old technological entrepreneurs who created Silicon Valley in the 1990s? They were the 10-year-old little boy mad scientists making robots and rocket fuel in the basement in the 1960s. And And if we did it in this day and age, it wouldn't just be little boys; it'd be little boys and girls, because science is much more open than it was at that time.
Right.
And the positive effect would be tremendous. Now, on the other hand, if we retreat from this, if we no longer think of this as the sort of thing we're going to do, it's too risky to fly to space. We'll go to Mars when it's safe. Okay, like it's going to become safe before we've been going there a lot of times. Mm-hmm. Then you're saying to people, okay, you're a smart kid, so you can get a job on Wall Street trading futures. Make some money, get a nice house. That's your goal. Okay, there's ways to do that. But if your goal is to do something world historic or to be part of something world historic, is society saying to you, welcome aboard, or is it saying go somewhere else?
That is such a good point. Well, Dr. Zubrin, I tell you, The Case for Space is an excellent book. I want to congratulate you for it. How can people find out a little bit more about you?
Well, about me as a pioneer on Wikipedia, but they can find out a lot about the book. And once again, here is the book. It's on Amazon, and there is an extract from the preface there, and you can also look side, I think. And there's a number of comments from people who have read the book. But of course, the best way to find out what's in the book is buy the book.
Absolutely. Dr. Zubrin, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me.
Your space journey.
Wow, I really enjoyed my conversation with Dr. Zubrin today. Hope you did too. His book, The Case for Space, is available now at your favorite retailer. If you'd like to learn more about the Mars Society, just go to their website at marssociety.org. I want to thank Dr. Zubrin for joining us today. Also want to thank Jeff Ayers of Death Wish Coffee for sharing his space journey with us earlier in the episode. Again, we'd love to hear the story of your space journey. Just give us a call at 317-862-4700, leave us a voicemail, or email your audio or video clip to info@yourSpaceJourney.com. I want to thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time. God bless.